Hello, good evening and welcome to another video from me, Bee. Hope you've all had a good week again. They're going a little bit too quick for me. But anyway, summer's coming, keep your fingers crossed, we might just get a day or two. Tonight's subject is something that I find personally quite disturbing, and I'm sure a lot of other people do too. And I have a bit of a mantra: if I can't see the bottom, I'm not going in. Because there are vastly unexplored areas of our planet, and none more so than our seas and oceans. The deepest known part of our oceans lies in the Pacific, at a depth of about 7 miles, and is called Challenger Deep. In terms of exploration, only 2 people have ever descended to our planet's deepest point. So, what does all that water hide beneath its depths? Let's take a look at Eerie Oceans. In 1997, what has become known as the bloop was heard on hydrophones across the Pacific. It was a loud, ultra-low frequency sound that was heard at listening stations underwater over 5,000 kilometres apart. And one of the many mysterious noises picked up by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Several articles in the years that followed popularised one suggestion that the bloop might have been the sound of an unknown animal due to the organic nature of the noise, a theory that elevated the bloop to the level of a great unsolved mystery. The NOAA is pretty sure that it wasn't an animal, but the sound of a relatively common event, the cracking of an ice shelf as it breaks up from Antarctica. NOAA and Oregon State University seismologist Robert Jack confirmed that the bloop really was just an icequake. He explained that the frequency and time duration characteristics of the bloop signal are consistent and essentially identical to icequake signals recorded off Antarctica. Each year there are tens of thousands of what we call icequakes created by the cracking and melting of sea ice and ice carving off glaciers into the ocean, and these signals are very similar in character to the bloop. 2 years later, on the 1st of March 1999, another sound was recorded on the Eastern Equatorial Pacific Autonomous Hydrophone Array. This eerie sound was named Julia and is thought to have originated between Bransfield Strait and Cape Adare. Again, this sound has been officially explained as either an icequake or an iceberg running aground in Antarctica, though there are still some who believe it is evidence of a massive sea creature. But the theory of a giant animal making noises loud enough to be heard across the Pacific is more fantasy than science. In November 2003, a research team based in Australia tagged a female 9-foot great white shark off southwestern Australia with a tag meant to record ambient temperatures and depth, allowing scientists to study the shark's behaviour. Just 4 months after the tag was attached, records show she abruptly dove almost 2,000 feet, with a 32-degree temperature spike from 46 to 78 degrees. The shark then vanished without a trace. The tag attached to the shark washed up on shore 2.5 miles from where the shark was first tagged. The filmmaker, Dave Riggs, was working with the team and was charged with documenting the study, which was released in a Smithsonian documentary in June 2014. In the documentary, Riggs and the team of researchers determined that the shark was eaten by something larger, but they were baffled by what it could have been. Researchers guessed that a large animal came up under the shark and dragged it to the bottom, where the animal was swallowed, causing the dramatic dive and the 32-degree spike in temperature. There were 2 likely guesses made. 1. The shark was attacked by another white shark. White sharks are prone to eating others in their species. Or 2. It was attacked by a toothy whale like an orca. But, according to a June 13, 2014 article in National Geographic, a white shark's stomach temperature runs between 65 to 70 degrees, which would not explain the temperature drop. On the other hand, an orca's internal temperature runs at about 90 degrees, which is well below the 70 degrees the tag recorded. The internal temperature of the animal that ate the shark is a weird one, said Rigg in the documentary. It appears to be too low for a killer whale and too high for another shark, unless it was massive. Cameron Braun, a doctoral student at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute in Massachusetts, told National Geographic that the orca could have swallowed cold seawater, which would explain the drop in temperature. Researchers still do not have an exact answer on what ate the white shark, but the internet has definitely had some thoughts on the subject, ranging from a giant squid to the return of the megalodon. However, there is one haunting fact about the incident. There is something in our ocean that is large enough to prey on a 9-foot white shark. Every ocean is deep and mysterious in its own way, but compared to the Mariana Trench, some parts of the ocean look like a paddling pool. The Mariana Trench, sometimes called the Marianas Trench, found in the western Pacific Ocean, is the deepest part located in any ocean. It's a 1,580-mile crescent-shaped section in the crust of the Earth. The truly impressive part of the Mariana Trench has nothing to do with its length, and everything to do with its depth. Although it hasn't been well explored because of the challenges associated with going that deep, the trench goes at least 36,070 feet deep. Everyone knows that Mount Everest is a massive challenge for mountain climbers everywhere because of its insane height and the weather conditions associated with it. But if Mount Everest were ever placed in the Mariana Trench, the peak of the mountain would still be more than 1 mile underwater. The trench is believed to be one of the most ancient seabeds on the planet, at approximately 180 million years old. Despite the lack of light and the hostile acidic conditions in the trench, a surprising number of organisms live there. There are more than 200 known microorganisms and small creatures that live in the trench, including crustaceans and amphipods. As more expeditions eventually explore the trench, it's almost certain new species will be discovered there. A new type of snailfish was found in the trench. The Mariana Trench was first pinpointed in 1875 during the undertaking of a global circumnavigation. It was found by utilising sounding equipment on the HMS Challenger. It was named for the nearby Mariana Islands. This undertaking, the Challenger Expedition, from 1872 to 1876, was revolutionary in the field of oceanography. During that time, the ship went almost 70,000 nautical miles, exploring and mapping as it travelled. During the trip, about 4,700 species were discovered. Some points of the trench are deeper than others, with the deepest section being called the Challenger Deep. It was named for two ships that have explored its depths with sounding equipment, the HMS Challenger and the HMS Challenger 2. The HMS Challenger 2 sounded the trench 76 years after the HMS Challenger first did, in 1875. Scientist Jacques Piccard and US Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh earned the distinction of being the first people to reach the Challenger Deep in a deep boat. It happened in 1960. James Cameron, the famed director, manned an expedition to the bottom of the Mariana Trench in 2012. While there, he took pictures, the first snapshots ever in the Challenger Deep. To reach his goal, Cameron had a 24-foot submersible designed that had a window which was 9.5 inches thick to withstand the enormous pressure of the deep. His trip was the first manned expedition to the trench since 1960. I included that because I thought it was quite eerie with the massive depths involved. And also, it blows your mind when you think about the Everest comparison. It's just enormous and deep, and there is no way that you would find me swimming above that. The colossal squid is part of the family Cranchidae. It is sometimes called the Antarctic squid or giant cranch squid, and is believed to be the largest squid species in terms of mass. The species is confirmed to reach a mass of at least 1,091 pounds. though the largest specimens, known only from beaks found in sperm whale stomachs, may perhaps weigh as much as 1,300 to 1,500 pounds, making it the largest known invertebrate. Maximum total length has been estimated at 30 to 33 feet. The colossal squid has the largest eyes of any known creature ever to exist, with an estimated diameter of 12 to 16 inches. Captured in 2007, the largest colossal squid weighed 1,091 pounds and is now on display at the Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa Tongaroa. Nothing escapes the yawning chasm of a black hole. No matter, sound or even light. Normally confined to the reaches of space, black holes and their seemingly insatiable appetites for everything have fascinated and enlightened scientists for years. Now they may not have to look so far to study them. Researchers at Switzerland's ETH Zurich and the University of Miami say that black holes are among us. At least massive eddies in the southern Atlantic Ocean bear their telltale signatures. What a black hole is to light, an ocean eddy is to water. Dubbed maelstroms, they're bigger than cities, winding up billions of tons of ocean water so tightly nothing escapes them. The ocean's natural turbulence has thwarted previous attempts to distinguish these islands of intensity, but by studying satellite imagery, two professors, Haller and Baron Vera, were able to identify 7 black hole types in a group of eddies called Agulhas rings that regularly appear off the tip of Africa. Their conclusion was that maelstroms have the same mathematical properties as black holes. Now consider a real black hole. There's a point where light being sucked into a black hole stops spiralling, bending instead, before returning to its usual position. This is a circular orbit. The dramatic effect of these closed light orbits, dubbed a photon sphere by Albert Einstein, finds a parallel in these ocean vortexes, according to scientists. Essentially, the maelstrom whips up its own closed barriers, pressing whatever was sucked inside so tightly that not even a drop of these fluid particles can escape. In fact, researchers have found eddies bearing the same bodies of water without leaking a drop for nearly a year. So would you ever have imagined black holes in the ocean? These black holes are said to be hard to detect. They're larger than cities. In fact, it's said by the time you realise you're in one, it's too late. Black holes can reach massive proportions, some up to 93 miles in diameter, and for some context, that's larger than the entirety of Greater Los Angeles. It's lovely to have a paddle along the shoreline at your favourite beach, but it's staggering to think that the water you're wading in contains an estimated 3 million wrecked vessels. From the RMS Titanic to the Queen Anne's Revenge, shipwrecks remain just as haunting today as they did when they first sank. The ocean has long devoured ships. Strong winds, wars and natural disasters have wrought devastating shipwrecks throughout the ages. There's something so fascinating about a sunken ship. It's as if the vessel was frozen in time at the bottom of a body of water. Sunken ships are invaluable submerged resources that tell us about what life was like both in the boat's place of origin as well as its final destination, even if it didn't actually make it there. For as long as humans have taken to the sea, there have been shipwrecks, but they're not all found underwater. After 9/11, during the rebuilding efforts at Ground Zero, construction workers stumbled upon something bizarre, just south of where the Twin Towers used to stand. It was a wooden ship, mangled and skeletal. No one knew where it had come from. It took 4 years, but archaeologists eventually used tree rings in the wood to reveal that the World Trade Center ship was built in the early 1770s from old-growth wood of the same sort used to build Independence Hall in Philadelphia. But no one knows who the ship belonged to, or how it ended up where it ended up. It may have sunk accidentally and inadvertently become part of the filled-in land that makes up parts of Lower Manhattan. Or it could have been deliberately scuttled as part of the foundation of that infill. The ship was discovered in the wreckage below the excavation site, approximately 22 feet below the soil. This finding is notable as very few ships have been discovered from the latter decades of the 18th century, and there is very little historical documentation related to how the ships that were produced during this era were constructed. Consequently, this ship offers us important insights into the history of American shipbuilding. Oysters were found fixed to the ship's hull, which suggests that the ship languished in the waters of the Hudson for quite some time before being buried by layers of trash and dirt that eventually formed the land upon which the Twin Towers rested. It is a little ironic that the World Trade Center attack, the historic moment that reshaped much of America's future, also opened up a door into America's past. Fear of the unknown and being out of our element has led many scientists and researchers to believe that people who fear water, or things within it, really fear being vulnerable and unaware. However, some may argue that legends passed down over many centuries from various cultures around the world, involving sea monsters, may still be present in many people's minds even today. Throughout the centuries, several different cultures have created stories surrounding creatures that lurk just below the water's surface, waiting to strike. The ancient Greeks were known for their variety in mythical beasts. Unknown to popular society, the ancient Greeks had several different water monsters within their mythology. One of the most frightening of these creatures is arguably the sirens. These creatures would lure weary sailors from the open oceans to shore, so they would crash their boats on the rocks and sink to the murky depths below. According to Greek mythology, sirens would lure sailors through their voices and songs that would put people in a hypnotic state. While many believe sirens to be a type of mermaid, their physical appearances, according to the mythology, resemble an ugly bird-like creature. Cthulhu is probably H.P. Lovecraft's most famous creation, described by Lovecraft himself as resembling an octopus, a dragon, and a human caricature. Sea monster names can be confusing, and the kraken is a prime example. The word comes to us from Norwegian, where it means an unhealthy or twisted animal, but it entered the popular lexicon when it was borrowed for one of the main antagonist monsters in Ray Harryhausen's Clash of the Titans. The version of the kraken that shows up in Clash of the Titans may have been inspired by the mythological Cetus, taken from the Greek word ketos, meaning a large fish or sea monster. In Jewish mythology, the Leviathan was subject to many paintings and old Hebrew tales. The primeval sea serpent lived near Hellmouth, or the jaws of hell. The word is now used more commonly to refer to whales and other sea monsters of impossible size. Hindu mythology has the Makara. Taken from Hindu myths, these sea creatures are protectors, positioned as guardians at throne entrances and entranceways into sacred sites and temples. Makara is also a word used to describe any animal-human hybrid with a mixed land-animal torso and aquatic lower body like a mermaid. Ponaturi from Maori mythology are horrible goblins that roam in a land beneath the sea and return to shore in the evening to sleep. They are unnatural beings that are harmed by sunlight and have a frog-like image with bulbous eyes and bulging gills. The Kalupalik in Inuit mythology is not one to discuss before bedtime. This haunting creature lives between ice floes and watches the surface world from the cold abyss below. It is skeletal, green-skinned, and has long searching fingers and sharp nails. Timingila come from Indian mythology. These things are capable of swallowing a whale whole in a single bite, and the aquatic monsters appeared in ancient Sanskrit epics and were described as deep-sea killers with many ranks of teeth. You'd be forgiven for thinking that this squid belonged in a myth as well, but they don't. They're real, and they live in deep waters, have piercing red eyes, and wear a cloak of webbing that runs to their tentacles. In Latin, their name means vampire squid from hell. Here are some true accounts taken from people who've posted on Board Panda and Reddit. I was on a boat tour that stopped off in a small bay, with beautiful crystal clear, light turquoise water and nearly white sands. We'd just finished swimming with some stingrays when the tour guide offered to take some of us out for a swim in deeper water. I was hesitant, as he said the current can get quite strong, and I'm not the best swimmer, but he said I could join them for as long as I felt comfortable, so I came along. There was a small group going at a leisurely pace that I could clearly see, so I decided to do some free diving. As I said, the water was gorgeously clear. I was diving down to these little reef outcrops and checking out the fish, and had barely looked ahead of me, other than to check on the group. I finished inspecting another little coral group, and turned round to see where the group were, and suddenly saw the sandy sea floor disappear over a knife-sharp drop-off. The water was so deep and inky blue, with no sea floor in sight, and my stomach somehow dropped into my feet and jumped into my throat at the same time. I surfaced as soon as possible, and got as far away from the drop-off as possible, and tried to pretend I never saw it. I was surfing Scripps Pier in San Diego about 6 years ago. It was flat, onshore wind, really messy conditions, but I spent 40 minutes driving there and said, I'll just get in the water and paddle round a bit. There was nobody in the water. I decided to paddle round the pier, going from the north side to the south side. When I reached the last pylon, a huge fin popped up about 5 feet in front of me. I knew instantly it was a massive white shark, 12 to 15 feet based on the size of the fin. I've been surfing my whole life. I've been in the water with dolphins many times. This was 100% not a dolphin. This fin was more triangular, with a serrated backside, almost like a steak knife, with a sandpaper-looking texture. Dolphins have more scoop in their fin and very smooth texture on their skin. The way it swam gave me instant chills. Fishy, more side to side and straight than the classic up and down, coming up for breath dolphin. I froze, trying to control my panic, waited for it to disappear, then as smoothly as possible, turned my board around, paddled to the pier, back to land. It was absolutely checking me out, but didn't show any interest towards me. Since then, I'm not afraid of sharks, but I still get the chills thinking about that day. I was diving off the coast of Okinawa, a relatively small island south of Japan, at night with a couple of buddies. We were making our way down approximately 150 feet, when we hit the bottom and see a 4-door sedan just sitting down there. We all kind of gurgled at each other in surprise, and made our way over to it. Inside was a briefcase, a kid's school backpack. In Japan, all of the kids wear the same style of backpack and it's very distinctive. And a couple of coffee mugs, but no bodies or anything. I was familiar with the model of car, and it wasn't more than 5 years old. Everything was pretty well preserved too. In retrospect, I wish I'd opened the glove box to see if there was paperwork for the car, but it didn't feel right to disturb the well-preserved scene. After we made it back to shore, I started doing research into accidents in the area, but there was absolutely no record of anything related to what we found. Kinda creepy but also cool. I'm glad there weren't any bodies. We did let the local police know about it and give them the coordinates on our way out of the area, but we never heard anything else about it. I remember a couple of years ago, a buddy of mine rented out a boat for my birthday to go out in the sea with. It was going perfectly fine. The boat was super nice, good for fishing and had a great deck. When he told me he was going to rent one, I thought to order a new fin to scuba with. It was a mono fin since I'd never gotten a chance to use one. I've been practicing with it, so it was perfect to use out in the sea. We started to go out off the coast of the Cape, and the water was a bit chilly but not ice cold. We were maybe 22 miles out from the coast, while still having an eyesight of the shore. My friend brought fishing baits and rods for us to use later on, but after I was finished scuba diving. I was ready to get off the deck of the boat with my wetsuit and monofin, my tank resting on my arm, before I was going to dunk in. After a couple of minutes I had this really weird chill down my spine. Not paranoia, but superstition. I brushed it off and put my tank on my back, followed by my goggles. I felt that weird superstition feeling again, but it quickly switched to paranoia when I saw a pair of glistening eyes in the ocean. At first what I thought was a shark, It had not been a shark. I've had my fair share of training for 6 years with sharks and other deep ocean water creatures, so I thought I'd be able to handle this. It slowly started making its way towards me. When I got a better glimpse of it, it was huge, and I mean massive. Its teeth were poking out the side of its jaw, and even had razor-sharp fins. And I know this wasn't a shark, because they have a more smooth, rubbery type of flesh. This one had scales like a snake. Blood was pouring out of its mouth. It looked like it was ready for its next meal. I attempted to hurry, but I was in shock, and I thought I was going to die from shock or this thing eating me. I finally cut out of shock the moment it started to swim more swiftly, but the monofin could only go so fast in the water. My buddy was getting a little suspicious that I hadn't come up with anything from the depths of the ocean. He looked over the boat deck and I guess could see me attempting to swim for my life, as a dark shadow was inching closer. I eventually reached the boat and out of breath, I told him to book it. We ended up not using the boat for the rest of the day and went home. To this day I have no idea what it was, but in all my years of experience, I don't want to find out. I was sailing a small sunfish around an island near Florida in shallow water. As I cruised along, suddenly a large section of water directly in front of my bow exploded with a large splash. Immediately after, my boat rammed into something under the surface and came to a complete stop. My first thought was, I've hit a reef. But suddenly, the entire boat was lifted up and spun round 90 degrees, almost dumping me into the water. Then there was another big splash, and I saw something zoom away, leaving a wake behind it. I was left freaked out and shaking. Then I thought to myself, I must have hit a big dolphin. Maybe it was a manatee? Lots of dolphins round here. So I finished my sail and went home. When I got to the beach, I pulled up the centreboard and found a real surprise. A 2-inch chunk had been bitten out of the wood. You could clearly see the marks of 3 large teeth. I'm very happy that I didn't fall out of that boat that day. When I got my first sailboat, I took it out on its maiden voyage on a beautiful April day in Hawaii. I was with a much older experienced sailor who was teaching me. About a mile out we saw a whale, then 5, then 20. They were all around us and singing the song of the humpback people. We were both terrified, as a whale can flip, and will flip, a 30-foot boat like a potato chip. They stayed with us, front, side, back and below, for about an hour. The singing was super eerie. Then on the way back to harbour, the damn motor wouldn't start and we almost got blown onto the rocks. I was never so happy to get back on dry land. Of course, we went back out the next day. And to end on a funny note, here's a story from Redditor, Monkey Junk. Lifelong sailor, and I've been unlucky enough to see some pretty bad things. But honestly, the scariest thing I've seen is a seaweed-covered hand coming out of the water. Me, the moron, didn't realise it was just a rubber glove that was full of air. And that's it for another week. Thank you so much for joining me again. I hope you enjoyed that and it's given you the heebie-jeebies somewhere. I will never, ever be able to go into deep water. I'm not even keen on boats. Anyway, until next week, stay happy, stay lucky, stay safe, and most of all, stay spooky.